And we are live. Hey, welcome everyone. This is Carlos. I want to welcome you to a Gadfly public broadcast. And boy, what timing. So today's guests are Will Lehr and Gus Demos of Perpetual Assets. It's perfect timing to have this type of discussion. So Will, Gus, welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't care. Either one of you want to do it. Why don't you start? We'll start with Will and give us a little bit around your background and PA, and it's kind of the things that you do with your company.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. My background is finance. About 10 years ago, I guess they say you take the red pill, and I was knee deep in financial planning, a financial advisor at the time, realized, oh my gosh, this whole thing is a house of cards. And anyway, that led me into precious metals and discovery there, got into the bullion industry. That's where I met my partner, Gus. And we soon after started Perpetual Assets as a way to help people that had money in IRAs and old 401ks to basically jailbreak those funds and put them in the client's control, where they can control the investments, they can manage the different assets themselves, and do so all underneath an IRA umbrella. We sell precious metals, we sell cryptos. Today is one of those days where we just manage client insanity. I mean, I'm talking people off ledges all day long. You know, it's rightfully so. It appears it's here, boys.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Gus, go for it.
Well, yeah, Will summed it up pretty nicely. We started working together, literally approaching a decade now, almost 10 years. Both very libertarian minded, very Austrian economic minded. The specialty of the firm when we launched it was retirement accounts and metal. We started literally like the same, right around the time Bitcoin came into existence when we started working together. So at the time, even at our foundation, we were always accepting Bitcoin through payment processors, but the focus of the company has always been retirement accounts and metal. Recently, we reincorporated in Wyoming, the most crypto-friendly state in the country, and now we offer retirement accounts, precious metals, and crypto. Very libertarian-minded, very Austrian economic-minded, very University of Chicago minded, which, like Will summed up, and you did too, you couldn't have picked a better day for it. We haven't seen, and I'm watching it as we're talking, we haven't seen anything like this. If it holds at these levels, we broke the anything we saw in 08, 09 for a single day. So this is insane. Yeah, we've never preached you got to go all in this, you got to go all in that, you got to go all in that. We've never, like, we've always, our focus since day one and still to this day has always been clients being in control of their stuff. Retirement account, it doesn't matter if you love metal. Our solution works perfectly for crypto and metal, but the main focus of it has always been client control. And if you don't understand how important client control is, if you've been asleep for the last 10 years, which understandably many have, because it's been a 10-year bull run in equities, but someone's like, oh, we're rich again. Like, yeah, okay. So the business cycle is usually 5 to 6 years. We're going on 10 to 11. So this correction, this crash, this whatever should be nasty as shit. And yeah, why can, and I have some pretty wealthy friends and we have some pretty wealthy clients, and why control is important today. And all the media has been saying today is the most hilarious thing of all. Panic selling bad, panic buying good. Now really think about that for a minute. What they're telling you is don't sell, you're good. To trust, if this thing drops another 20, 30%, and you weren't liquid or had no liquidity, then what are you, crazy? But they want you to keep buying, call your financial advisor. Even if you have net worth over $1 million, call your financial advisor. And it's gonna be like, oh yeah, we took, so we're staying there. These people aren't bears. They're not. Whenever you talk to a financial advisor, they always give you their numbers starting in 2009. I don't know if you've ever noticed that or not. You never have a financial advisor saying, here's my record since 05. And if this is if I'm right, and this is it, or we're in a 2008, 2009, or a .com, or a 92, or an 87. If we're in what I 99% I'm sure what we're seeing right now, you'll see financial advisors start to tell you their record will reset, and they'll only start giving you their returns after 2020. So they won't bring up because think about it. If we reset equities right now, it doesn't matter what market or oil. If we reset equities to 2012 levels, no one's going to brag about that anymore. They're not going to tell you what they did from 2010 to 2020 anymore, because now suddenly that's not that impressive anymore. Mm-hmm. So they'll reset the time frame in regards to what they're telling you the returns, because they're all about impressing you. But you'll never have financial advisors don't make money off you being in liquidity, and most of them, especially the big funds, aren't sitting there shorting the whole time. So if you were a real savvy retail investor, real savvy, which I list asterisks, this isn't financial advice. 3 weeks ago, when you saw the VIX and volatility indexes go apeshit crazy, you would have been shorting the last 3 weeks, and you would have made a killing already.
Right.
And even so that's sophisticated investors. If you're not sophisticated and you still time this thing perfectly, a month ago you would have gotten liquid and just been sitting in cash. Mm-hmm. And then you'd wait this out. You'd be, if you knew what you were doing, if you were real badass, you'd be shorting the whole way down. If you're intermediary or whatever, you'd be liquid the whole time and just waiting for the bottom, and then you'd pile on to some sort of asset class. I'm digressing another.
No, that's okay. Well, guys, what I'd like to begin is, because you're right, Gus. I do see a lot of people posting, people who not quite certain as to how we arrived at this point. There's still people who are like, this is a great time to get into the market. Those things that we've heard before, but how do we explain to that person who may or may not be so financial savvy, when the last year to 3 years we've heard just great things about the stock market, about the economy? How did we arrive at this point? And I know it may sound a little bit elementary, but I think for the purpose that I want to achieve, to actually help people in terms of finding solutions, I think it's imperative to kind of build a little bit of a scenario of how did we arrive at this point where the stock market's at all-time high. We've conditioned people that these are the new norms, and then where we are today. So how did we get to this point?
Do you want to go first, Will, or you want me to jump in?
Sure, I'll go first. We got to this point from a century of central bank intervention. If we just go back to the last financial crisis in 2008, and we just look at the metrics of the amount of just look at currency creation alone, the amount of stimulus in the last decade plus now, 12 years, the amount of economic financial stimulus that's been pumped into the equity and the bond markets is unprecedented. So we've had this kind of like a roaring 20s, we've had this just exuberance in the markets, specifically in the global equity markets and the bond markets now, for quite some time. Like 2008 should have been a much deeper correction, but it wasn't. It was saved. It was band-aided with nothing more than a band-aid, right? More cash injected into the system. And there have been several times over the last 10, 12 years where they've had to, QE 1, 2, 3, QE to infinity, where they've had to monetize even further to keep things propped up. What this whole culmination right now with the coronavirus outbreak, very unique timing on this viral outbreak, because it is serving as the catalyst and the scapegoat for something we've all been waiting for a long time, which is a major correction, a major crash. I mean, this is not going to be a correction. This is most likely going to be a major crash. When the 10-year U.S. Treasury, I mean, what was it, 1.5% like a week ago? Mm-hmm. And then it dropped below 1 for the first time ever on Friday. Crazy. And then last night, futures markets, it dropped down under 50 bips. I mean, forget about the equity markets being closed this morning. When treasuries are moving that much, when currencies are moving that, the oil market, I mean, you have major commodities and indices dropping 30% overnight. It's unprecedented. So I think to answer your question, why or what got us here, a whole lot of makeup, a whole lot of tricks. And I don't say that in a bad way, but I mean, the powers that be have been trying to prop up this system for a long time, probably in hopes that we can outproduce it. You know, we can get to a point where we create all this economic growth and we can fix those papered over, band-aided problems. But when you understand the economics of it and the true math of it, you really can't. The only way to fix this is to go back the other way and take some really nasty medicine that we should have taken in 2008. So we didn't take our medicine. We band-aided a whole bunch of holes in the leaky dam, and now it's medicine time.
Gus, go for it.
All right. So the whole reason after people get to this sector usually one of two ways, either economically or politically, right? So eventually you come to the same place, and the place is even within this sector. You have like the University of Chicago School of Economics and the Austrians, and they disagree on a few things, but what they do agree on is monetary theory and the history of central banking and the history of asset classes and markets. So if you study the 150, 200-year history of this country, or any country for that matter, you'll see that it all goes based on business cycles. Asset classes rise based on liquidity and credit, not only hard money in the system, but banks willing to expand credit to people. And that's where interest rates come in. So and that's why the central bank's so important. It controls interest rates, the cost of money, thus lending, and then it also controls money supply. Although credit could be anything that could bid up goods and services and assets is how you define inflation. So if you look at 150 years of this country, you go back and look at all these booms and busts, all these bubbles, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, where the layman isn't going to see that. They're going to be like, oh, you have the old man Buffett playing the ukulele, telling you just buy some stock and shut up. But if you really look at this, it's all cyclical. And it usually since 1850, or if you want to start after the Civil War, fine, call it 1870. From 1870 to 2020, you could see these business cycles. You could see money and credit expanding, and then the causation of that, and that's where people differ. They call it causation versus correlation. The causation of that money and credit expanding causes asset classes to go up: real estate, bonds, equities, commodities, whatever. It also bids up goods and services and labor and the rest of it. But what happens eventually, the tab comes due, and credit and liquidity dry up. Everyone pulls their money back. Banks stop lending, and it causes everything to retract. Classic debt deflation. What occurs during the debt deflationary times is all the asset classes crash. We're seeing this today is a perfect example. The last 3 weeks are a good example. 08, 09 is a good example. .com's a good example. You could keep pointing these things, and they all look the same from an interest rate policy standpoint, from a central banking policy standpoint. So the argument is, there's two arguments. For someone to sit there and think that this is just going to go up forever, if you pull up a 100-year chart, it's going to go up. But if you focus in and start looking at 5 years at a time, or 10 years at a time, or 20 years at a time, you start seeing these crashes. You start seeing bam, bam, bam. What lengthens the crashes usually is the way central banks respond to them, through interest rates or increasing their balance sheet, or the money supply, et cetera. The problem is since the Fed's creation in 1913, is they've only handled a few of them pretty well. Like 87, they kind of handled well. 1920. This is actually a good, if you really want to study history, look at the 1920 crash and then look at the 1929 crash. What the central bank did in 1920 is they got out of the way and they let everything crash like a son of a bitch over a couple months. And then 1921s, everyone's right back to normal. And we could see that this could get really nasty for 30 or 60 days. And then by the middle of the summer, end of summer, we forgot about it. Because everything, the assets marked to market swiftly, really hard. Same thing happened in 1987. George Bush won the election in 88, 89, because the 87 crash was so quick. It was nasty as shit, but it was quick. And that's where the central bank comes into play. How is the central bank going to respond? And what happened in 08, 09 is so much liquidity, so much on their balance sheet, et cetera. The point of all this is that crashes are corrections, crashes. They are inevitable. That's just part of business cycles. That happens. So the last 10 or 11 years has put people to sleep. This has nothing to do with Trump. Forget about Trump. Forget about there's central bank stimulus, and then there's Treasury Department stimulus. So it doesn't matter what good of the job Trump is doing or blah, blah, blah. These things are inevitable. My hope is that it would have happened after the election. Now my hope becomes that this is a 1987 or a 1920, not an 08, 09. So my hope is that this shit crashes hard for a couple months, and then we're back to normal. In regards to the virus and Saudi Arabia, Russia oil, I was just reading an article, and it's beautifully, Doug Cass was beautifully said, these are just two black swans. Like these are two, and me, you, and V were texting about it last night. These are just two dominoes that were required for everyone to be like, all right, might be time to take these 10-year profits down. So the smart money, although CNBC and Bloomberg and Fox Business are going to be like, oh yeah, keep buy into this, it's a bargain. The smart money is already on the sideline. They're either shorting it or they're in liquidity right now. That's what's going on.
Yeah, it's crazy to see the events unfolding the past at least 12, 24 hours that took place. And, one has to ask is this an orchestrated event? And I completely agree that, because I've been in the financial sector before when you meet with your financial advisor and for the first time and you come in and you're considering bringing your portfolio over to them and they sit down and say, okay, well, here's our 30-year performance and here's the trend. And, we manage upon trends and there's downturns and there's upturns. And I think this is a different situation, guys. I don't think that there is history that kind of maybe rhymes with the point that we're in, but to take a look at the last several years of dollar dominance and what's taken place, we're seeing a divide that's occurring right now where both not only utilizing oil, which has been a huge black swan event that's came in and really has changed the dynamics, the way things are looking at, where now we're considering that, hey, maybe OPEC is dead. Maybe the petrodollar, its days are numbered as well. And one has to ask, does the central banks, do they have any more ammunition left to try to prop this up? Where are the central banks? Where is the Fed? What else can they do?
So there's only two forms of stimulation that could be utilized. One is the Treasury Department. The other is the central bank. So when you're going to see press conferences and all this nonsense here the next week or two, and the same thing happened in 08, 09. So the Treasury Department, one in economics classes in the university, one is called fiscal stimulus. That's when the Treasury Department gets involved and starts putting shit on the public's balance sheet. That's where the national debt comes from. So that's what it's referred to as fiscal stimulus. And then there's monetary stimulus, which is what the central bank does. And that's done through money supply and interest rates, and then expanding their balance sheet. They can't. The problem with expanding the balance sheet is they already did that for the toxic assets in 08. They started putting mortgages and all that bullshit on there. So and what can they do in regards to their interest rate policy? It's, as Will said, we're already approaching a NERP. I think we've got past NERP.
You mentioned 87, right? And that was Volcker, right? So in 1920, they backed off, right? And they just let the market crash. In 87, Volcker jacked rates, didn't he? I mean, interest rates were like 13% or something.
That was 79. So that was inflation. That was the Jimmy Carter and Volcker inflation. And Volcker handled it basically by taking interest, which took a lot of nerve and a lot of guts. And so that was to slow down inflation. That's when inflation, we had the closest thing we've experienced to runaway inflation. I was only 2 years old. I wasn't there, but God, that's sad.
Silver broke out. That was $100, right?
Oh yeah, that's the first time gold hit 800 or 900 in 1980. That's how my parents bought their first restaurant. They sold a bunch of gold and silver coins in 1979, 1980 at the quote unquote gold bubble at that time during Volcker. But what you see now, 1920. They got out of the way. 87, they got out of the way. There's a certain amount of pain that needs to take place. And when I say pain, I mean assets must mark to market. Without fiscal stimulus, the Treasury Department, or monetary stimulus, the central bank coming in and they're going to try to reinflate this stuff immediately with minimal pain. The problem is when you do that, you delay the inevitable, which is assets marking to market. It's an artificial. It's like putting a bike pump. Like you have to let the tire go flat first, and it'll be painful, but it'll be quick. You're ripping off the Band-Aid, you're ripping off the tourniquet, letting the thing bleed out. But the good news is, 4 months ago, we not if handled properly, we might not be talking about this in 4 months. If they keep trying to mess with it, either through the central bank or fiscal policy, then you might see a 1920. Dude, the Great Depression, because of liberals, and they still hold FDR like Jesus. The Great Depression lasted 17 years.
Yeah.
I mean, in 1920 lasted months. The Great Depression lasted a generation almost. And that's because a commie was in there, a socialist was in there, being a socialist. He delayed the inevitable, and they still hold him on this pedestal. It's like, maybe if he would have got out of the way, it might have been over by 33, but it went all the way to World War II. So that's the question. Are they going to get out of the way? And if they get out of the way, that's when you're going to see Dow at 12,000. That's when you're going to see S&P at 1,700, 1,600. You're going to see 2012 levels. So you're going to see this thing, all this inflation over the last 10, 11 years that they've been propping all this shit up with. You're going to see everything deflate back to where it's going to mark to market instead of marking to unicorn. So I don't know if they will, though. You have an election coming up. Yeah. So Trump's going to tell them to go into ZERP, NERP. He's gonna meet with the Treasury Department. He's gonna say, and this is not unique to Democrats or Republicans. They all do this. You have an election coming up in 8 months. He is gonna pound the Treasury Department to do. The question is, well, if the Democrats might block it, they might come in and say, no, asshole, we want you to lose. Yeah. So you're not pumping 500 billion into the economy. Are you crazy? I don't know if they have the political, because then you'll have people being like, because that actually makes Trump look like a hero if the Democrats block him. If he calls it the virus stimulus or something,
they can't afford to do so. If that's
that would be political suicide for the Dems. Yeah, I don't know if they're willing to do that or not.
Well, it's very interesting to watch the last Fed rate cut when they reduced it 50 basis points, and at first it held right. It kind of calmed things down and it situated, but then turmoil took back over, and I think it ended up closing that day probably 600 or 700 points, and we know that the Fed doesn't have a lot of points to give up, and there's a lot of speculation. Will the Fed ever get to zero? Will they ever go negative? And what most people don't encounter is the fact that the debt and how much debt is being leveraged, and the fact that the credit market, that the banks that are being impacted not only by the coronavirus, which we're going to talk about here next, but also just the fact that with oil and how many financial institutions are tied directly into that with U.S. shale, that they're going to take a huge hit here pretty soon. I think in April and June, when they have to look at those particular loans and the volume that's out there in terms of U.S. shale, and it's going to be devastating. And I know that this has been by design. I don't know whether the Saudis and Russia have worked behind the scenes to say, hey, we've mutually decided to do this. But let's first start with the coronavirus. So what are your guys' thoughts? Fear mongering? Is this real? What are your thoughts in terms of the coronavirus?
I'll go first. I've been all over the place with this thing for the last 6 weeks. Sean at SGT Report had me on his show before we went to Anarchapulco. This was the end of January. It was like the 30th or the 31st. And I think he titled the interview, "Will Coronavirus Be the Black Swan That Takes Down the Economic System?" or something like that. It was still early at that point, right? I was debating, geez, do I go to this conference? I don't know. There's like people literally being barricaded into their apartments in China. Like, this thing looks really gnarly.
Yeah.
But so I had a several week period there where I was like, no, I think this is being overplayed. I don't think it's as bad as they say it is, and all this. And now we've had more time for things to develop, and other countries and other areas where we're not trusting this communist central Chinese party to give us data and information. We have other areas like South Korea and Italy. I I follow Cliff High. I respect his work and his data and his research. He got pretty freaked out about this thing a couple of weeks ago, to the point where a lot of us were like, oh, crap.
It made you change. It changed my mind a little bit too when I saw how emotional he became on.
I've been pounding vitamin C and chaga mushroom, including my children. I mean, so I'm not really worried about the virus after doing more research and more things have opened up. When you boost your immunity incredibly, I don't think this thing can mess with you.
Right.
So I'm not that concerned about the safety of my family, but I am concerned about all the other implications, it overwhelming the healthcare system. Do I think guys like us have a risk of being knocked off? Probably not. I think it really mostly appears to be attacking, elderly, people with pre-existing conditions, but it's way more deadly than the flu. I mean, if you just look at the numbers that the World Health Organization is releasing, which again, we're Chinese based. So we don't know how much we can even trust. That's the thing with this. It's like we kind of just have to sit around and wait. I finally got my wife prepping, dude. I took the red pill 10 years ago. Yeah. God bless her for not leaving me at the time, right? Gus and I built a business. We help a lot of clients along the way, but all of our clients, all of our media and affiliate partners, I mean, everybody is up in arms. And so, yeah, I don't look, it appears to me that this thing is a bioweapon. It appears that it was orchestrated and designed. I mean, if you go and look at the scientists who've broken down all the proteins, and they're like, well, it's got all these different things that have been, added or manipulated so that it's more, has the MERS, the SARS, the HIV, all these different components to it. It's scary, but I don't think we should freak out. Aside from its ramifications on the economy, on the healthcare system. I mean, who knows if we're going to have, quarantines in different cities and towns in our country. It looks like we might.
News just broke a minute ago that troops have been deployed to the California border to keep any type of rush of immigrants coming into the United States. So we are seeing a little bit of U.S. military getting involved at this point.
Well, there goes my beach house this weekend.
They should have done that in 1980. California might still be Republican. I'm not worried about shit. Meaning, I'm not worried about the virus. Actually, let me rephrase that. I'm only worried about one thing, and I'm not worried about the virus. I'm not worried about SWAT teams. I'm not worried about any of that shit. What I'd be worried about is zombies. And by zombies, I mean sheep. And by sheep, I mean the people in the street that riot and loot if Facebook goes down for 10 minutes. So if you've observed this country the last 5 years, we could talk about, you could go down any rabbit hole you want, but if you just look at the country the last 5 years, these people burn cities down if you use the wrong pronoun, or they lose the wrong election, or if someone's speaking at a university. So you've already seen all this fighting and people losing their mind in Costco's and this and that, and women attacking each other and over a roll of toilet paper and shit. So my only concern would be if I'm driving somewhere and a bunch of rioters and looters who are freaking the fuck out try pulling me out of my car or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like the concern is the herd. It always has been.
That's deep, Gus. That's deep. Yep.
Well, it's not.
Most people don't evaluate that.
They lose their mind. Have you ever seen these people on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving? Have you ever seen them shopping in a Walmart?
Yeah.
These people.
What about putting some of those on pay-per-view?
Yeah, I mean, we spend all the time focused on the government and this virus and this and that. I'm like, what you really have to worry about is the people losing their minds, because they do. We see them lose their minds over the little shit. If the internet went down for an hour, these people would go berserk or whatever. Like they're
the medicine, the fact that 80% of the world's medicine is manufactured in China, and China's fucking ports, pardon my French, and doors have literally been closed for 50 days now. I mean, there's reports of how many people are medicated in this country.
You take what if you took all the Prozac out of California? How would those people respond?
This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Those I'm not worried about my eyes bleeding from the virus. I'm worried about the zombies. Like,
Yeah.
and I use that because it's real. We've seen it already. They are batshit crazy lunatics on Twitter. What are they going to be like in the streets? So that'd be my concern. And it's like Will said, we got the food, we got the water, we got the weapons. It's like, that's why I always joke around. I was talking to her bookkeeper this morning. She's like, what do you think? What do you think? I'm like, do you have your guns and ammo? She's like, yes. I'm like, you'll be fine. Like,
it's a crazy thing, because that's why, don't take this the wrong way, but that's why the coronavirus is so effective. Because if you were to do like a hub and spoke effect of corona, you put corona in the middle, and there's so many different spokes you could go with that. One agenda potentially could be, with what a lot of people have talked about, is to get U.S. manufacturing back to the United States. And with this taking place, this is going to force a lot of, because most people don't realize how many different either components or raw ingredients that come in from China to produce a finished product here in the United States, where now companies are going to be forced to reevaluate their supply side, where they're sourcing some of these products from. So there's that component, that this was an agenda to force U.S. manufacturing back to the United States. Not saying that that's it. I'm just giving some different, scenarios. A lot of this is speculation. The second angle that a lot of people talked about was that China knew that there were going to be more uprisings taking place, similar to Hong Kong, and that they potentially may have released this almost maybe on their self to stop that. Right? There's just so much different speculation. And then there's the agenda here in the United States, where now it's being looked at politically. And, we all know that Trump has been a champion of the stock market. I mean, gosh, you could look anywhere to see his tweets. And now they have kind of taken that away from him to a certain extent. Like, okay, well, now he can't be hyping up like all-time high and, super great. What I'm more concerned about is that now we may have given the banksters, the central bankers, the planners, they may now have their little scapegoat in terms of reality. And now Corona provides that excuse that, okay, look, we're having a 60% market correction taking place right now. And the coronavirus created all this, versus where, people like us who, specifically know the reality of what's taken place the last several years, where your average person doesn't understand that. And I've posted before, and people have been like, no, this whole market correction is a direct result of the corona. Well, like I said earlier with V, is that most people don't understand that if we had such a dynamic world economy, that something of the coronavirus and its nature, something that small, should have never impacted things the way that it's currently doing. And so anyway, but what I want to say, Gus, is what you said is very important earlier, is that I don't fear the coronavirus itself. What I fear is what people do, what the masks do as a result of this, and then also what government does. And I think we're starting to see certain states who want to follow this same agenda, Washington, New York, where they're going to force this. They're going to continue hyping this up. So what comes next with their plans to disrupt potentially the U.S. economy with the coronavirus?
The vaccine.
This might make me listen. This might make me sound like, and I hate to use the word, 'cause it's from I think it was originated maybe in the Civil War. I hate to sound like a carpetbagger, but there are fortunes to be made in this shit. There are fortunes to be made in chaos. There are fortunes to be made in crashes. There are fortunes to be made in all that. If you want to take an optimistic view about it, me and Will text every fucking day, and I've actually kind of been like I'm like, oh my God, gold hit 1,700 last night. Like, we're in the gold business. Our phones won't stop ringing. Oh my God. They're like, oh my God, I've been shorting the last 3 weeks in equities. Like, I've actually never been better. My view this as an opportunity. I was shopping flights from Vegas. First of all, Vegas is a ghost town right now. I have buddies coming in. I'll give you a few examples. It's anecdotal evidence, but let me give you a few examples. I have buddies coming in 2 weeks for March Madness. One of them called the hotel last night, told him he was going to cancel. The hotel gave him 3 free nights only made them pay for one night.
Holy shit! Wow.
The Cosmopolitan, one of the best hotels. I mean, they're giving shit away. I was looking at Vegas flights to Chicago last night, $110 round trip. I haven't seen that in 20 years. View this as an opportunity. Keep your wits about you. Don't become some, frightened of your own shadow, walking on eggshells, neurotic. Like the Kennedys made their fortune during the Great Depression, bootlegging and the Great Depression. It's argued like fortunes are made in this shit. It doesn't matter. Everywhere you could see opportunities. Stop paying $50 for toilet paper and look for buy a barrel of oil or something at 25. Look for value. There's value out there. Be patient. Be stoic. Keep your wits about you. I do agree with one thing the media is saying. Don't panic, but be smart. Meaning, like, they want you to buy into this shit now. I'd be like, why now? Why wouldn't I wait 25% more if that's going to happen? There are opportunities out there. Don't view this. Don't be afraid of chaos and the zombies. View it as there might be some value I could see here soon. So don't be fearful. Grab it by the throat instead, if that makes sense.
Real quick, we do have one question, and one person specifically asked regarding China, and it's very unfortunate through this, but we've seen a lot of negative things. And I'm not saying China's like, the innocent country, right? I'm not saying that at all. But a lot of questions have been asked in regards to the amount of debt that China holds. And it was interesting. I was listening to Greg Hunter, and he's still stuck on this belief that, China has so much debt and they're going to collapse before the U.S. ever would. But one of the questions specifically asked in regards to the U.S. treasuries that China holds and the event, what happens if they would cash those treasuries in, and what are your guys' thoughts? Do they even need to do that at this point, or do they just sit back and kind of relax? They can just let the term on those bonds or whatever kind of expire whenever they do and cash in. I don't think there's any need for them to run their own risk.
But that's their final bullet in the trade war too. So we've been hearing this thesis for runaway inflation forever too. So there's a pretty popular video on why gold's going to hit 5,000 an ounce or whatever, and it was the final domino to drop was China dropping treasuries or dropping treasuries in the market and whatever. I think that's game theoring even too far out. And yes, Will knows one of my financial man crushes is Kyle Bass. So Kyle Bass is like one of his longest leveraged shorts is against either directly or indirectly through China and Japan, and that's because of their shadow banking system. We really don't know what's in their balance sheets, and the China banking bubble is going to be like, it's going to make 08, 09 look like nothing. But you're right, we don't know. Like, I don't know what's on those balance sheets. I don't know. We don't know how much of it's real. Just like the virus, they're commies. They're full of shit. Like, they lie for a living. So you want me to believe China? It's like I don't believe it. I don't believe the U.S. I'm going to believe China, really.
Right.
And that's why Kyle Bass has had frustration, because he's been trying to get a lot of transparency and honesty from them on what's going on with their banking system, whatever, and they keep propping this thing up. So everyone thinks something's weird about China. The problem is, how can you force them to give us transparency? I mean, again, dude, they put Muslims in genocide camps on the west side of the country. Like, it's a commie authoritarian state. Like, they're an evil state. It's a one-party commie state. So they're very dangerous, and it's even more dangerous when you think they might run the next century. That's for me, that's the most terrifying thing.
Mm-hmm. Will, thoughts on that?
I mean, do we know that they're not already dumping treasuries right now?
Great point.
Well, I think last year was probably one of the largest that they did, but I'm not sure if it was due to the dumping or just the expiration of the date.
Dude, the waterfall in the yield the last 8 trading days or whatever is unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen a global currency or bond move that much. For the yield to drop that, so maybe they already are. I mean, trying to analyze, to Gus's point, the trade war or any type of this international relation is extremely difficult, based on it's the Communist Party. They're notorious for lying and for doctoring and cooking the books and everything else. But I would think, this virus release, this halt in manufacturing out of China, and absolute halt in trade. I mean, there are global logistics issues right now that are so extreme. Even if you don't do business with China, the reefers, the refrigerated containers that they ship all the produce and anything that has to be refrigerated, for that matter, or frozen. There's, because of the Chinese halt and close of their ports, the whole logistical global reefer supply is bottlenecked and screwed up. I mean, you can't, you're having European countries that trade with one another across water that can't do it now. Only because they're not even trading with China on this particular subject. So, yeah, I mean, the Treasury thing is just another massive. But I think that might be their last bullet in the chamber, to Gus's point, right?
I firmly believe that there's probably just one more dagger potentially coming into the existing, banking system. And before we shift into solutions, I want to try to work in two points here real quick. And we're already starting getting a lot of conversation in regards to what the government can do. And we all know during the mortgage crisis, during Lehman, we watched the government intervene, prop up a lot of banks, prop up a lot of companies in terms of stimulus and printing money, which, in my opinion, yielded very much little result to the middle class, where now there's another extraction method that's happening. And my fear is that the government's going to come up with all the stimulus to potentially pump up healthcare companies, whatever they deem necessarily, that which may not be the correct thing to do. And that's why I specifically wanted to have you guys on with Perpetual Assets and talk about the importance of, becoming your own banking, learning to manage your own funds and what's taking place. But what do you think? How do you think the government's going to react? Post 9/11, we saw so much occur, with NSA and spending all this money and creating all these different government agencies. And now we have another crisis in front of us. How does the government react?
It's however they would react, expect it to be worse because it's an election year too. So they're going to preach security with the virus stuff. On the economic side, you're going to see fiscal bag of tricks, monetary bag of tricks. On the virus side, on the public health side, I would expect they would beef up security. They always react the same. It doesn't. This part is the part that where it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat. The government just keeps getting bigger, man. Like they always act the same. You've never seen anything peeled back. As much as I like Trump about the cultural stuff, he hasn't peeled back, the pat downs and bullshit and all that at airports. So the state is the state. The state keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I would expect that to be more of a power grab. And on an election year, I wish if this was after the election, I would think maybe he'd have the fortitude or courage to just let things, let the dust settle. But in an election year, I think they're going to throw the kitchen sink at this thing.
Yeah, I think that's most likely. I think we have to answer that question. We really have to look at and consider what is the agenda of the administration. Well, back after post 9/11 and the Bush era, the agenda was UN 2030 or whatever. It was global domination, right? It was the good old boys, the Bush family, and all their ilk trying to gather as much control of as many resources and everything, right? And centralize, and just screw over as much of the populace as they could. So then that brings us to today, and we have to, what is Trump's agenda? Personally, I don't really know. I think the jury's still out, right? Because there's still pat downs, and there's I don't know. Hopefully, I have a lot of hope that maybe this whole crash and virus and everything else is going to be used to further an agenda of exposing criminality and arresting a whole lot of people. We've had CEO resignations that are just, the spike on that graph is insane. So I don't know. I think you really have to analyze what is Trump's underlying agenda. Is it global domination, or does he really represent the people? And we want to try to gather the republic back from this centralized deep state control mechanism. If that truly is his agenda, then we should see a very different response, right? We shouldn't see another Patriot Act. But
yeah, the CJ though, again, the one asterisk that, but mind you, we talk about it all the time, me, you, and V. Like I think the guy's been doing great for 3 years, but the one caveat that worries me is it's a fucking election year.
Yeah.
Like that's the problem. He has right now. If we ask what the priority is, it's getting reelected. It's like, I mean, this thing is, what are we, 8 months out, 7, 8 months out? Like that's when you throw in massive crisis, doesn't matter if it's economic or health or whatever, security, and then you have an election. Damn, I don't know. That's what's concerning to me. I don't know if the way someone acts once they're trying to get elected is the same way they would act if they had nothing to lose.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
To CJ's point a minute ago, where you said one of the potential reasons, speculative reasons for this thing being released when it was, could be an attack on President Trump and an attack on the election cycle and an attack on the markets. He's been hyping, the markets, and now look at what's happening. So that would seem to make sense, as would his response to the virus. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's like the flu. You're only at risk if you're, over 70 or you have a pre-existing condition. Like, he's downplaying it, right? That's a cause for consideration. Why do I have the mainstream media telling me one thing, and I have the state of Washington saying another, and I have, and then
the media's greatest concern last night was people calling it Wuhan virus being racist.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, these people have become beyond laughable at this point.
Yeah, and I always want to remind everyone, like, the people that are criticizing Trump and saying he's downplaying it, he's not doing the right thing. Let's also remind those individuals that post 9/11 that George W. Bush was telling people to take vacations and go to Disney and do all these things. There's a specific reason that they want them to try to keep the economy, keep things going as normal as possible.
Consumer confidence, right?
Yeah, exactly. But now we're learning about school closings and everything take place. And I've said this, as well as on Rogue, but I think what we have to be mindful of is that, Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, has given us the blueprint of what they utilize these for. There's agendas. And what I'm specifically worried about is that, with the coronavirus, one, there's definitely a healthcare play where they say, well, due to the limitation of the launching of Obamacare, now we really need to look at some type more of a universal healthcare program to ensure that all people can get taken care of the coronavirus, because we struggle with that. So that's one play. The second is the vaccine mandates. We've seen several states, California, New York, who have really tried to institute vaccines. And we know that there's been a lot of pushback, even to the point now where most media platforms, whether it's YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, have specifically said that, if you're questioning vaccine safety, you're probably going to get removed or banned from this. So there's an agenda there. So what I get concerned about most is that, like, I saw Trump's reaction to the vape epidemic that took place when people who were utilizing black market THC vapes, and there was a few deaths. And Melania got involved and said, we got to do something for the children. And I just know that Melania, Ivanka, and Jared always kind of have his ear in terms of things that take place. And not saying that he would support any types of vaccine mandate, but there's numerous things that they could utilize the corona for specific agenda type reasons for social impact. And I want to make people aware of that we need to be mindful of that and track that, so that when they start having these discussions, that we're prepared for it.
Dude, the vape thing was so criminal. What about the kids? What about the fentanyl? What about the heroin and the poppy and the opium trade that comes out of Afghanistan that's processed by our frickin' troops? Like, I digress.
That's okay.
The children. We've had 3 deaths from vape pens. Oh, yeah. Really? How many millions of kids have we lost in the last decade from fentanyl and from heroin?
Well, I want to close it out. Oh, go ahead, Gus. Good.
No, yeah, I was just going to say the old Stalin quote: "One death's a tragedy, a million are a statistic." Where they'll take something that's not that big of a deal and they'll try to make it seem. Well, look at from a political side. Look at they're still talking about like the Charleston thing. So a bunch of commies fight. One commie dies getting run over by some Nazi. They find 3 Nazis in the South, and all of a sudden Hitler's hiding under everyone's bed. It's all a scam, dude. So 99% of what these people say is a scam. That's what you got to keep in mind. It's at the end of the day, they don't give a shit about you. They not you, and that's why when I see them crying about, gotta let them in, refugees, immigrants, this, that, and I'm like, they just killed 1 million Iraqis. You think they give a shit about immigrants? Like, wake up! Like, are you that dumb? Right. Like, it's a scam. Like and I wish people would just stop buying into this gibberish. And that's not me being pessimistic. That's just me being skeptic and real. It's like when one thing, and I brought up the Wuhan virus, like they were acting offended about that. When one thing contradicts another, that's paradoxical. Like that's cognitive dissonance. It's 2 things that don't belong together. So the same people that you see laughing about 250,000 Libyans dead or whatever, and they tell you don't use this word because it offends people. It's like, dude, shut the fuck up. Just get away. Enough. Like they
what was the last one? Prepping is selfish. That was a good one.
Yeah. You see what I'm telling you, dude? Like these people are like, oh, don't get too much water. It's selfish. Like, what? You want me to, let me make sure I give the purple-haired commies water so I can make my family die. Like, what? Get away from, like, just, dude, they're con artists. This is a scam. Don't listen to all that gibberish.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we have about 9 minutes left, and the whole purpose and the idea regarding getting you guys on with Perpetual Assets, and I've put out so many different tweets, messages in regards to people, and really taking a hard look in terms of where their money is and the things that they're doing, and knowing that there's people who are still so plugged into the current financial system. And now is just so important to really take care and take ownership of your assets and where your funds are going to. And a lot of people don't know, how can I buy gold? Or if I want to put a little bit in cryptocurrencies, how do I do that? And it's time. I mean, we are, in my opinion, in the 11th hour of making those determinations. So, why, in my opinion now, and I'm not getting paid 1 penny from Gus and Will, so that I just want the public to know that in regards to self-directed IRAs, and why it's so important right now to control your own investments in terms of where your dollars are. So
we haven't even brought it up, so it's worth mentioning. The last month, gold has been the only safe thing.
Yep.
Only, not. And listen, we sell silver and crypto too. So I love them. I love all the above. And we talked about that a couple days ago, and I mentioned it to Will too. If you would have asked me, if shit hits the fan, problem is silver has industrial uses, so that's dragging down the cost of silver. And crypto is just, there's too many people that don't have time to speculate right now. Everyone's shitting in their pants. So I think the greed of crypto, I think some of the greed that goes into speculating on crypto has kind of been dialed back for now. And gold is the only safe haven. If you look at all asset classes, across mainstream asset classes, alternative assets, you look at everything, gold is the only thing kicking ass the last 4 weeks. It's kicking ass. Everything else has been like, including silver and crypto. And listen, we sell all 3, but gold is dominating right now. Across, it doesn't matter if you go to CNBC or Bloomberg or whatever, pull up a 30-day chart of anything, and gold is the asset performing better than anything else right now. So as we alluded to, our bread and butter is retirement accounts, and we also sell metal and we also sell crypto, but the client being in control. Doesn't matter if he or she wants to sit in cash, if they want to get in metal, if they want to get in crypto, if they want to buy stock, if they want to buy whatever. Our solution offers you total control of the timing, control of what you're buying, control of how you hold it, control of all of it. So we've always put priority in making sure the clients dominate their portfolio. And that's why the last 3 weeks is just a perfect example. We don't have many clients from going back almost a decade that are like, shit, we really regret doing that. Like, no, it's look what's happening the last 3 weeks. Like, you're welcome. And I didn't mean to sound arrogant there, but the what you're seeing the last month in the world is exactly, and that's why we're doing so well right now. It's the timing is now. So,
and you guys aren't new to this game either. This isn't new.
No, we're not. We're way past startup mode. Yeah.
Well, I think that's important just because there's so many fly-by-night companies out there that are doing different types of services, but you guys have done all the due diligence work behind it in terms of compliance and all that, and that's just so important that you can't look past that.
It is, and we're never in the business to, and this is probably in 8 years of Will and I doing interviews and all the rest of it. This is probably the most doomy and gloomy I've ever sounded, actually. And just in regards to like this, I think this is it. In my mind, I've been waiting for another 08, 09, but our company was formed after that. So we haven't seen what a lot of us have been waiting for. So this is the first time that I'm saying it. And I always tell Will, I don't think this is it yet. This is the first time I'm saying it. I think this is it. Like, I think this is we've been waiting for this. And I think we're here. And I never make predictions and I never tell people when to buy something. But this is it. I feel for me, volatility gives it away. The 3 weeks of what we've seen in volatility that's the smoking gun for me. This isn't normal. This is it. So, and I never make predictions ever, but I think this is it.
Right. Will, anything to contribute or add to that?
Learn how to sprout seeds and grow vegetables. That's probably the best investment you could make right now in yourself. No, I think, Gus hit the nail on the head. I mean, we've been doing this for about 8 years. The conversations that we have with clients and friends are awesome. I mean, we've spent time helping people trying to figure out how things are unfolding and unraveling and how they can best protect themselves financially. And in times like this, it's where things sort of rally together. We can have a lot. There've been a lot of really fun conversations with clients and tweets and chats and texts and things. As all of us kind of almost hold hands and watch this thing and go, oh snap! This is it. I don't know how you could look at this right now and say this is not it. From everything from the virus to the global supply chain shutdown to the oil fiasco. It's all over the place. So there's like we said, multiple black swans converging at once. All you can do is try to stay sane and stay calm, and don't let fear and panic overrun you. Humans, we are resilient. We're a resilient species, right? We've weathered a whole lot of storms in the last couple thousand years or whatever. So this is just another one of those. And if you're watching this, if you're already ahead of the crowd, right? You just have to, as Gus said, protect yourself from that crowd. So
and remember, like I said, I don't expect. I would never encourage someone who doesn't know what they're doing or this or that to go ahead and start shorting on 50 times leverage or whatever. But fortunes are made in these times. Let me just remind everyone that. The time to buy property was 2009, 2010, when people were abandoning their houses on golf courses and there were mosquitoes. That the time to buy Google was 2002 after the time. Fortunes are made on the back end of these things. So don't panic, don't freak out and be like, God damn, where can I get some? And I don't care if it's a free hotel. I don't care if it's airfare. I don't care if it's equities or whatever, or metal, or look for value, look for bargains, look for this. Keep your wits about you. Don't worry about licking ants off the sidewalk and Mad Max stuff. Worry about, God damn, maybe I could get rich in the back end of this shit. Like, that's how the oligarchs think.
Right.
That's time to buy is when there's blood in the streets. Like that's when people are like, where other people see problems, successful people see opportunity. Like there are fortunes that are being made on this if this is the one.
Yeah, and just to follow that up is that don't be that deer in headlights, right?
No.
Don't be there and complacent. Take charge now. And that was the whole purpose of having you guys on, was to talk about perpetual assets and the solutions that you can provide. And I talk to friends and family, daily, that are trying to understand this. I know you guys do as well. And they look at you like, what are they strange? What are they talking about? But now's the time, and for people to embrace the transition that we're going through, and to look at the solutions that have been provided. So either one of you want to share how to connect with your company, your site, and how to begin, leverage your company for people to take charge of their IRAs and retirement accounts.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah. Perpetualassets.com is the website. There's contact us, an email feature on there. Phone number is 888-281-2630. You can get a hold of Gus or myself directly through that. And we're here to help if we can, and a lot of folks, maybe your IRA or if you have a 401k and maybe it's trapped somewhere, or you're curious if maybe you can get to it, give us a call. If we can help, we're here to try to help. And if we can't, then we're here to advise you on, here's kind of where you're at right now. So, but yeah, we're happy to help. We're happy to go through different scenarios in any way that we can help people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gus, Will, thank you guys for a great conversation. And for our Gadfly subscribers, please, again, leave comments directly in here. I will definitely post links to get a hold of Gus or Will at perpetualassets.com. Gentlemen, thank you for a great conversation today.
Always, dude. Always.
Thanks, CJ.